The night over Kathmandu trembled with power. High above the sanctum's roof, a shimmering wound in the fabric of reality pulsed like a dying star. Dr. Stephen Strange stood alone upon the stone terrace, the cloak of levitation coiling in the wind as though it sensed something ancient stirring beyond comprehension. The eye of Agamotto glowed faintly at his chest, responding to a vibration not of this universe, a call that whispered through the dimensions with the resonance of doom. Strange had witnessed cosmic disasters before, the collapse of worlds and the birth of new realities, but this was different. This rift was not a tear caused by magic, nor a natural flux of dimensional energy. It was hunger, a devouring maw, radiating despair. The stars around it seemed to bend inward, as if the void itself were feeding upon light. He reached out with his astral senses, expecting to touch the familiar hum of the multiverse. Instead, he heard screaming. Countless voices layered upon one another, their anguish echoing through eternity. He recoiled, his breath catching in his throat. The cloak fluttered anxiously, tugging at his shoulder like a warning, yet he could not turn away. For weeks he had felt the growing instability, a distortion in the quantum currents linking reality's roots. The Vishanti's silence had been troubling. Even the all-seeing eye had failed to pierce the source of the disturbance. Now the rift stood open before him, its edges rippling with crimson lightning. "Wong," he called, though his voice felt small against the cosmic storm. The librarian appeared at the doorway, his expression grim, a tome clutched tightly in his hands. "The texts of the Ageless Codex speak of the veil beyond," Wong said, his tone low. "It is not a place of realms or gods. It is absence that dreams. Even the Ancient One dared not name it." Strange turned toward him, eyes gleaming with the light of conviction. "If this rift connects to that absence, then it threatens everything. I cannot let it grow unchecked." Wong stepped forward, alarm piercing his composure. "You know not what you touch. The Codex warns that within the veil lies a sea of thought made flesh. There is no return for those who enter." But Strange had already decided. Ever since his hands had been broken and reborn, he had learned that some paths must be walked alone. He moved closer to the rift, each step pressing against an invisible pressure that made the air taste like iron. The rift pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, its glow intensifying as if aware of his presence. He whispered an invocation, weaving protective sigils in the air. Golden lines flared into life around him, forming concentric circles that hummed with dimensional stability. "If the multiverse is in danger," he said softly, "then I must know what lies beyond." A cloak tightened about his shoulders, reluctant yet obedient. Wong's voice rose in desperation. "Stephen, the eye cannot protect you there. Whatever exists past that veil is not magic. It is madness." Strange glanced back one last time, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. Then let madness speak its truth. With a motion swift and certain, he extended his hand into the rift. The world convulsed. Every atom screamed as colors inverted, sound became light, and gravity folded in upon itself. He felt his soul stretch thin, his consciousness unmoored. The eye of Agamotto shattered open, revealing the blinding glyph of time's core, and then everything ceased to be. He floated in silence. There was no direction, no sensation of body or breath, only thought, and then from that void came the whisper again. Thousands, millions, uncountable voices murmuring in discordant harmony. "Welcome, intruder." Sudden visions assaulted him, mountains of screaming faces. Oceans boiling with the blood of extinct civilizations, cathedrals of bone illuminated by dying stars. The air, or whatever passed for it, tasted of despair, and incense burned for dead gods. He saw creatures with wings made of flame and eyes like shattered suns, twisting around him in cruel fascination. They did not exist, yet they were real beyond question. He tried to focus his will, shaping the 7 rings of Ragador into a sphere of light. It flickered uncertainly, swallowed by the vastness surrounding him. "Where am I?" he demanded, his voice trembling in the infinite dark. A laugh answered him, deep, mocking, endless. "You are in the current beneath all thought, the warp, the sea that devours." The name echoed in his mind like a curse. He had studied countless dimensions, but never one that felt alive. The warp shifted around him, a landscape of formless horror, where memory became terrain and emotion shaped reality. He realized too late that his very fear was feeding it. The shapes drew closer, whispering his name, offering knowledge and ruin in equal measure. Every spell he conjured only drew them nearer, attracted by the shimmer of his defiance. Strange forced his mind into focus, recalling the mantra of the Ancient One. We do not master magic, we navigate it. He reached within, pulling upon the spark of his humanity. The sigils flared once more, brighter this time, casting a fragile circle of light within the nightmare. Around him the warp recoiled, shrieking in fury. "I am Dr. Stephen Strange," he declared, his voice echoing through unreality itself, "and I will not be consumed." For a moment silence answered him. Then, faintly, the darkness rippled. He saw far in the distance a flicker of material space, like a candle in a hurricane. He reached for it, feeling the cloak's weight return, his form coalescing once again. Reality tugged at him, weak but insistent. And then came the pull, violent, irresistible. The warp screamed as he tore free, flung through endless storms of psychic fire. The last thing he heard before the light swallowed him was a voice neither God nor man could bear to hear. "You cannot heal what was never meant to be whole." He fell through the veil, his body blazing with raw energy, and crashed into a world of ash and iron, unaware that he had crossed into the realm of the Imperium of Man. The warp closed behind him like a mouth sealing its prey, leaving only silence and the faint scent of burning stars. He awoke without breath, suspended in a vast expanse that was neither air nor water, but something in between, a living medium that pressed against his skin and thoughts alike. Light came in convulsions, streaks of color folding in upon themselves, dissolving into shadow, then flaring again like the dying pulse of a sun. There was no up, no down, no ground beneath his feet, only the endless, formless sea of the warp. Dr. Strange tried to steady his breathing, though there was nothing to breathe. His senses rebelled against reality's absence. He looked upon the horizon, if it could be called that, and saw currents of raw emotion taking shape, rivers of despair, whirlpools of rage, clouds of lust and ambition drifting like storms. The warp was not merely energy, it was consciousness, fragmented and screaming. He moved, or rather willed himself forward. The cloak followed, its edges flickering as if aflame, struggling to maintain coherence. Time flowed strangely. Seconds bled into hours and hours into an eternal moment. Every heartbeat felt wrong, as though another pulse, alien, colossal, echoed through his veins. He realized that he was not merely inside this realm, it was inside him. The whispers began softly, like the rustle of parchment in a crypt. Then they multiplied, filling his mind with a cacophony of voices, some pleading, others mocking, many indistinguishable from his own thoughts. Strange, Doctor Master of Nothing. He clenched his fists, summoning wards of silence, but the voices bent around them, relentless. Each whisper seemed to carry the weight of souls devoured by eternity. He glimpsed shapes in the distance, colossal silhouettes drifting through the currents. Some resembled the forms of men, titanic and draped in armor that glimmered like molten brass. Others were impossibilities, shifting faceless, their contours dissolving into waves of laughter and screams. One turned toward him and the warp rippled with recognition. The creature's presence was a violation of logic. Its face split into 1,000 mirrored masks, each reflecting a version of Strange, one triumphant, one broken, one corrupted beyond saving. A mortal mind, unshackled, it said without sound, its voice a tremor within his bones. "You swim in the thoughts of God's little sorcerer. Do you seek truth, or to be unmade by it?" Strange raised a hand, invoking the seal of the seraphim. Light burst forth, pure and defiant, but the entity merely laughed, and the light fractured into shards. "You wield order here. Foolishness. All that enters the warp obeys its chaos." He refused to submit. Channeling the remnants of his discipline, he focused upon a single thought, anchor to self. The world quaked as his will coalesced, forming a fragile platform beneath his feet, a disk of shimmering runes drawn from the ancient language of the Vishanti. The warp hissed at the intrusion of order. Storms of psychic energy battered him, threatening to erase his creation. He gritted his teeth, his mind burning with effort. "I am the Sorcerer Supreme," he whispered, voice trembling under the strain. "I define my reality." The words were a mantra, a shield against oblivion. For a moment the ocean of screams dimmed, retreating in uneasy respect. Then, as if insulted by his defiance, the warp struck back. The sea convulsed, birthing horrors from its depths. From below surged a swarm of figures, human-shaped yet eyeless, their mouths wide and soundless, their bodies stitched together by threads of thought. They rose toward him, carried by the current of despair. Stranger's heart thundered. They were memories, echoes of countless minds consumed by this realm. Victims of the warp's hunger. He conjured the crimson bands of Sitarak, binding them with the energy of the soul stream. The crimson light coiled around the phantoms, scattering them like ashes in a gale. Yet for every one destroyed, 3 more took its place. Hands of incorporeal agony reached for him, brushing against his aura and leeching warmth from his soul. His spells dimmed, the cloak strained to lift him higher, its fabric fluttering like a dying flame. The ocean churned beneath him, glowing with malignant brilliance. Faces rose from the depths, some pleading for release, others sneering with mockery. Among them, he saw flashes of his own past. Christine's sorrowful gaze, the Ancient One's calm warning, the moment his trembling hands first found purpose. The warp was dissecting him, peeling away his resolve to feed upon his fears. He forced his mind to focus on the present. He could not let sentiment dissolve his reason. "You will not claim me," he said, more to himself than the abyss. A surge of golden light burst from his form as he called upon the infinite compassion of the Vishanti. The ocean recoiled, its surface boiling away from his radiance. But even as he held the line, a realization crept into his mind. This light, this purity was fuel to the warp's hunger. Every exertion of will drew the realm closer, tasting him, learning him. The whispers shifted tone, no longer cruel but seductive. Why resist, Stephen Strange? You are power unbound. You could shape eternity, remake the laws that bind lesser beings. Join the current and rule as we do. He faltered, if only for a heartbeat. The idea was poison wrapped in beauty, yet within its venom lay a truth he could not deny. His universe, fragile and ever threatened, could be remade here. A single thought and balance restored. But instinct screamed against it. This was not creation, but submission to chaos. He closed his eyes and exhaled, letting go of desire. "The cost of control is corruption," he murmured. Whoop. He extended both hands, tracing a sigil of banishment in the air. Reality shuddered. His light condensed into a single blinding sphere that exploded outward, scattering the phantoms and driving back the ocean for a fleeting instant. Silence returned, or what passed for it in this world of thoughts. Strange floated alone, his strength fading, the cloak trembling weakly around his shoulders. He looked out over the endless expanse, and for the first time he sensed direction. There, far beyond the horizon, flickered a faint gleam of structured reality, something solid amidst the madness. A breach. A passage home, or deeper still into damnation. He gathered his will, every fiber of being straining toward that distant light. The warp groaned, its voices rising once more into a choir of rage and mourning. "I will find my way," he vowed, "or I will be the first to map this nightmare." The ocean responded with laughter, vast, eternal, cruel. The light grew nearer, its pull intensifying, and before he could resist, the current seized him, hurling him forward with unimaginable force. He tumbled through the Imperium, surrounded by screams that were not merely sound but memory and madness combined. Then, as suddenly as it began, the noise ceased. The warp parted and he was flung into the cold embrace of matter once more, falling toward a sky of rust and fire, where the shadow of a dying sun bathed a world of metal and prayer. He struck the ground, unconscious, as sirens blared and the soldiers of the Imperium of Man descended upon the fallen sorcerer. When consciousness returned, it did so in fragments, light first, then sound, then the suffocating weight of iron air. Strange's body ached with a heaviness that was not physical but spiritual, as though gravity itself had conspired against him. He opened his eyes and found himself bound within a cell, carved from blackened stone. The walls pulsed faintly with circuits of glowing script, symbols that flickered with both technology and sorcery. The air stank of oil, incense, and sanctified ash. He tried to move, but chains anchored his wrists and ankles. They were not steel, but something older, etched with runes of warding that burned against his skin. A low hum filled the chamber, the steady rhythm of a machine's heartbeat. Beyond the bars, torchlight flickered, revealing shadows of figures in robes and armor, their movements precise, reverent, and cold. The sound of metal boots approached. A man stepped forward, his armor engraved with skulls and purity sealed. His face was a map of scars, his eyes hard as tempered glass. "He lives," the soldier muttered to someone unseen. "Emperor, preserve us," another voice answered, feminine, sharp with authority. "Bring the Inquisitor." The name cut through Strange's confusion. Inquisitor, Inquisitor. The word carried weight even here, in a world he barely understood. He recalled flashes from his fall, towering cathedrals of steel, banners woven with holy text, machines that moved like living prayers. He was not in his own universe. He had crossed into a place ruled by faith sharpened into a weapon. Minutes passed like hours. Then the door to the chamber hissed open. The woman who entered was neither priest nor warrior, but something between. She wore a black coat lined with parchment strips inscribed with scripture, a rosette clasped at her throat. Her hair was silver, though her face spoke of unyielding will rather than age. Her eyes regarded strange as one might a dangerous relic. I'm Inquisitor Loren Faust of the Ordo Malleus, she said. You will answer truthfully, heretic. Her tone was devoid of emotion. You fell from the heavens in a blaze of unholy fire. No vessel, no machine. Yet you bear the mark of psychic resonance unlike any human recorded. Explain yourself. Strange met her gaze calm despite his restraints. I am not your enemy. My name is Stephen Strange. Was a protector of realms. I came here by accident, through forces beyond your comprehension. Lariani's lip curled slightly. Beyond comprehension? The arrogance of witches never changes. You are a psycho unbound and unregistered, capable of bending the warp without sanction. You speak of realms, yet your presence reeks of sorcery. Tell me, servant of the dark powers, do you serve Tizen Chi? The name struck a chord within him. He had heard whispers of it within the warp, a voice that promised knowledge and ruin. No, he said firmly, I serve no god. My power is drawn from discipline and the higher laws of existence, not from corruption. The Inquisitor studied him for a long, silent moment. Then she nodded to the soldiers behind her. Begin the trial. They moved forward, placing a device upon his head, a circlet of steel lined with needle-like probes. As it activated, his vision blurred. The world trembled as psychic pressure flooded the room. He felt the intrusion, a cold spear entering his mind. Voices not his own began to whisper again, but these were human, sanctioned psychers bound to the Inquisition, probing his thoughts with sanctioned cruelty. He tried to resist, calling upon his inner wards. The symbols of the Vishanti burned within his mind, their golden light battling the invasive force. The psychers recoiled briefly, one collapsing to his knees as blood trickled from his nose. Lyran watched without flinching. Interesting, she murmured. He resists trained psychers, not easily done. Increase intensity. Pain ignited through his skull. The warp howled around him, drawn to the conflict. For a moment, the walls of the chamber warped and flickered, shadows twisting into impossible shapes. Through the agony, he felt the presence of something vast pressing against his consciousness, a memory of the ocean of screams. It stirred at his pain, eager to claim him once more. He forced the vision back, focusing on a single thought. I am not their monster. With effort born of years mastering the mystic arts, he stabilized his mind, pushing the psycher's intrusion aside. The chains glowed as they tried to contain the backlash, crackling with energy. When the storm subsided, the Inquisitor stepped closer, her expression unreadable. You have the strength of a demon host, she said quietly. Yet your mind holds no taint of chaos. Impossible. I told you. He managed through ragged breath. I am not what you believe. Where I come from, I protect life. I contain what you call the warp, though we know it by other names. Her eyes narrowed. Contain the warp. No one contains it. Not even the Emperor himself, blessed be his name. She turned away briefly, speaking to her aide. Prepare a transport to the citadel. This one is to be studied further. The soldiers hesitated. My lady, if he breaks containment, he won't, she interrupted. Not if he values survival. The Emperor's light will judge his truth. As they moved to escort him, Strange glanced toward the dim ceiling, sensing the faint hum of distant engines and the chanting of billions. This world was drenched in faith so absolute it bordered on madness. He could feel its psychic resonance pressing against his thoughts, trying to define him within its doctrine. When they dragged him through the corridors, he glimpsed more of the fortress above, massive statues of saints and martyrs, their faces eroded by centuries of incense smoke. Monks in mechanical robes walked beside armored giants whose eyes glowed with power. The air was thick with hymns and machine oil, every sound echoing reverence and fear. He realized as they led him deeper into this metallic labyrinth that he was no longer merely a visitor from another world. He was a trial, a question this universe did not want asked. His very existence defied its order, and as the iron doors closed behind him, sealing him within the heart of the Inquisition's domain, he felt the warp stir once more beyond reality's veil, whispering his name like a promise. Somewhere in that cosmic storm, something had taken notice. The trial of Dr. Stephen Strange had only just begun. The shuttle descended through skies the color of rust and sorrow. From the narrow viewport of his containment cell, Strange watched lightning crawl across the horizon like veins of molten glass. Below stretched a world that looked as though it had already died 1,000 times and refused to admit it. Monolithic cities of black iron pierced the clouds, their spires vomiting smoke and prayer alike. Between them sprawled wastelands of ash, scarred by trenches and colossal engines of war. It was a civilization both magnificent and broken, a cathedral built atop its own corpse. The vessel shuddered as it cut through turbulence. Strange could feel the psychic hum of the planet beneath him, a low, constant chant vibrating through reality itself. It wasn't natural. It was will, collective and immense, the belief of billions burning like a furnace. The Emperor. The name alone seemed to pulse through the warp like a heartbeat of dying stars. The humans here prayed with such force that their faith became a weapon, a shield, and a prison. When the shuttle landed, the doors opened with a hiss of sanctified steam. Fane. Soldiers in crimson armor surrounded him, each one marked by purity seals and oaths written across their armor in parchment and wax. They treated him not as a prisoner, but as something worse, an infection to be quarantined. The ground beneath his boots was metal, slick with oil and rain, yet sacred inscriptions covered every surface. Even the air smelled consecrated, heavy with incense meant to smother sin. The Inquisitor emerged from the mist, her cloak whipping in the wind. "Welcome to Vothrax Prime," she said, her voice echoing over the landing deck. "A forge world, you stand upon the threshold of humanity's divine labor." Strange looked out across the horizon. Endless factories stretched into the distance, each one belching smoke thick enough to blot out the sun. Foo. In the distance, titanic constructs moved, machines so vast they seemed alive, each step shaking the ground. "You build your faith into your machines," he murmured. Lauren's gaze was unwavering. "A faith sustains the Imperium. Doubt births heresy." She gestured, and the guards pushed him forward. "You will learn this, sorcerer." They led him through towering corridors of iron and glass. Servitors, human forms grafted with machinery, moved along the walls, their mouths murmuring prayers as mechanical limbs hammered, welded and inscribed holy text into metal. The constant noise was deafening, a symphony of devotion and industry. Stranger's senses strained beneath the psychic static. Every worker's faith was a spark in the warp, creating a blinding storm of belief. At last they reached a great hall. Thousands of candles burned in iron sconces, their flames struggling against the suffocating air. Statues of saints and warriors loomed over the dais where the Inquisitor stood. Strange was forced to kneel, the weight of the chains pressing him into the floor. "This world thrives upon the Emperor's mercy," Lauren said, "but it lies close to the eye of terror. Warp storms gnaw at its edges. We have lost entire manufactorums to corruption, and now you appear from the sky, wrapped in fire and madness. Tell me, Dr. Strange, why should I not see you as the herald of our damnation?" He looked up at her, meeting her gaze without defiance but with understanding. "Because I have seen damnation," he said quietly. "I've walked through its heart. The place you call the warp, it is not your God's creation. It is chaos incarnate, shaped by thought and desire, and if you continue to feed it with fear and hatred, it will consume you." A murmur ran through the hall. The guards shifted, their faith trembling at the edge of rage. One of them stepped forward and struck him across the face. "A blasphemy!" Lorraine raised her hand, silencing the room. "And yet he speaks as one who knows the Immaterium," she said. Her expression betrayed a flicker of curiosity. "Tell me, heretic, what did you see within it?" Strange hesitated. The memories burned like acid, the faces in the warp, the laughter of the gods. "I saw a sea made of thought. I saw despair given form. I saw your Emperor's light piercing the dark, but only barely." Her eyes narrowed. "You claim to have seen the Master of Mankind?" "I saw his echo," he replied, "a beacon of suffering, a flame that will not die even though the universe demands it. Even though the universe demands." The Inquisitor stepped closer, studying him. "If you lie, your soul will be forfeit. If you speak truth, then you have seen what none should. Either way, you are a danger." The hall filled with tension as she raised her hand. A pair of soldiers approached with a relic, an ancient device shaped like a cross, radiating sanctified energy. "This is the sigil of the throne," she said. "If your soul is tainted, it will burn through you." They pressed it against his chest. Light flared. Strange cried out as his body convulsed, the symbols on his chains igniting with blinding intensity. But as the energy surged, it bent, twisting around him rather than through him. The relic hummed violently, then shattered, its fragments scattering like sparks. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Inquisitor lowered her hand slowly, her composure fractured for the first time. "The sigil does not fail," she whispered. Strange fell forward, gasping, the scent of burnt metal thick in the air. "Your faith sees only two paths, purity or corruption, but there is balance in between." "That is where I walk." Silence hung heavy. Then, without warning, alarms blared. The candles flickered as the ground trembled beneath them. A booming voice echoed from distant Vox systems. "Warp breach detected. Level Sigma, demonic manifestation inbound." The soldiers drew their weapons, fear sharp in their eyes. Strange felt it before they did, the veil thinning, the warp's tendrils pushing through. The same storm that had carried him here was returning. Lyrane's command voice cut through the chaos. "Seal the lower gates. Purge the sanctum." She turned toward him, eyes fierce. "If this is your doing, sorcerer, I will burn your soul myself." He met her gaze, the tremor of the warp rippling through his thoughts. "No," he said, rising slowly despite the pain. "This is your world's doing. You've lived too long with your gods staring back." The walls split with light as the warp tore open once more, spilling shadow and fire into the heart of the Forge world. And in that instant, as the demonic storm consumed the sky, Dr. Strange knew that his arrival was not an accident. It was a summons. The universe had called him to this world of ash and iron, and its purpose had only just begun to reveal itself. The world shook as the veil between reality and madness split open. The Forge's steel towers shuddered under the warp's assault, machine prayers twisting into screams as demons poured through the breach. The air itself ignited, heavy with the scent of burning oil and corrupted incense. Sirens blared, their tones rising into an unholy chorus as the Imperium soldiers fired wildly into the rippling void. Bolter rounds exploded against things that refused to die. Strange staggered to his feet, the chains still clamped around his wrists, their runes flickering as though uncertain which power to obey. The warp tore open fully now, a vortex of colors beyond comprehension, birthing shapes that defied reason, spires of flesh, eyes that bled light, and wings that hummed with laughter. "Contain the breach," Larin shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Her soldiers obeyed with disciplined fury, forming a perimeter as their faith chants rose into the storm. "The Emperor protects," they roared, firing into the endless tide. But Strange could see it already. The breach was growing, feeding on their desperation. Without them, the warp would claim all. The soldiers surrounded him once more, weapons ready. Lauren gave the order coldly, though her eyes lingered on him longer than she intended. "Take him back to confinement. His fate will be decided by the Emperor's judgment, or by fire." As they dragged him away, Strange did not resist. He could feel the warp's echo still humming beneath the planet's surface, watching him, waiting. It was not done with him, not yet. The Inquisitor's voice followed him through the corridor, half command, half confession. "You saved this world today, sorcerer. But salvation is not innocence." He glanced back once, his expression calm, almost pitying. "And damnation is not justice." Their eyes met briefly, the chasm between faith and understanding yawning wide between. Then the door sealed shut, plunging him into darkness once more. Within that silence, the faintest whisper stirred at the edge of his mind, a voice from the warp, smooth and patient. "You closed one gate, Strange, but how long before you open another?" He said nothing, his thoughts drifting into the endless dark as the iron walls of the Imperium closed tighter around him. The verdict had been passed, though the trial had only just begun. The walls of his cell pulsed faintly with mechanized light, every rhythm synchronized to the heartbeat of the planet itself. Strange lay upon the cold metal floor, his body weak but his mind still burning with quiet defiance. Hours, or perhaps days, had passed since the breach. He had not been questioned again. The guards no longer spoke to him. Even the Inquisitor had vanished from his presence, leaving him alone with the silence, and the faint hum of something greater pressing against his consciousness. That hum grew louder with each passing moment, resonating beneath thought, beneath reality. He could sense it now as clearly as he sensed his own heartbeat, a psychic beacon pulsing through the galaxy, cutting through the infinite black like a wound of light. It was a call, one so ancient and powerful that the warp itself seemed to bend around it. He felt it whisper through the layers of existence, tugging at his astral form like an unseen tide. He sat up slowly, the chains around his wrists clinking. "What are you?" he murmured, though he already knew the answer. It was the light the Imperium worshipped, the dying star upon the golden throne, the beacon they called the Emperor. Strange closed his eyes. His consciousness slipped from his body like smoke. The room dissolved into shadow, and his astral self emerged, glowing faintly in the still air. He drifted upward through steel, through stone, through the mechanical arteries of the fortress. The higher he ascended, the louder the pulse became. It was not sound, but purpose, an ancient will that had outlived its body. Then, without warning, the warp opened before him, not in chaos this time, but in solemn majesty. The sea of madness parted, revealing a single golden path stretching across eternity. Strange followed it, his form trembling under the weight of its radiance. Around him, galaxies flickered and died. Souls screamed in distant echoes, yet none dared cross this sacred current. He came to a door of light, vast beyond imagination. Upon it were carved 1,000,000 prayers, each one glowing like a dying sun. When he touched the surface, the light accepted him, not as a stranger, but as a witness. It pulled him through. The world beyond defied mortal comprehension. He stood in a vast chamber of light and bone, the air alive with the sound of 1,000 machines humming in grief. And upon the throne at the center of this eternal machine sat the Emperor of mankind. Strange had seen gods before, arrogant, radiant beings who fed on worship, but this was something different. The figure upon the throne was not alive in the mortal sense, yet neither was he dead. His flesh had long since withered to ash, but his mind burned brighter than any star. Tubes and conduits pierced his form, feeding his decay even as they sustained his light. The psychic pressure radiating from him nearly crushed Strange's essence. He knelt instinctively, not out of reverence, but out of sheer awe. "There. So this is what you've become," he whispered. A voice answered, not aloud, but within him ancient and infinite. Another trespasser from the void. Another fragment of will unbound by faith. "Speak, stranger." Strange's astral form trembled beneath the voice's weight. "I am Stephen Strange. I came through the warp by accident, but I see now that nothing in this universe happens by accident. I've seen your Imperium. Your people worship you as a god, yet you're chained to a throne of your own making." The golden light flickered, as though the words had stirred ancient pain. "I am no god," the Emperor's voice thundered, shaking the warp itself. "I was never meant to be worshipped, yet belief has become my cage." Strange rose to his feet, his eyes narrowing. "Then why do you let them suffer? Your name holds them together, but your silence breaks them." "They live in fear, not faith." The voice softened, heavy with millennia of sorrow. "Because fear endures, hope fades. Humanity survives through obedience, not enlightenment. They would not survive the truth." Strange walked closer to the throne, his form flickering against the golden radiance. "The truth is the only thing that can free them. I've seen the warp. I've seen what it does to minds that refuse to face it. You could end this cycle. You could teach them balance." The air trembled. For a moment, he thought the Emperor might strike him down. Instead, the vast eyes of fire opened upon him. What he saw within them was not power, but agony. Infinite, ceaseless agony. "You speak of balance as if it were choice," the Emperor said, his tone almost human. "But I am bound by the warp itself. Every moment I hold the Imperium at bay, I die anew. Were I to release even a fraction of my will, your galaxy would burn in a single breath." Strange felt the enormity of it, the unending strain, the sacrifice of 1,000,000 souls every day to fuel this dying god's existence. "Then you are the light and the prison both," he said softly. "You've become what you fought to destroy." The golden aura dimmed, the light whispering like the sigh of a dying flame. "Perhaps. But even gods must bleed for their creations." The words struck him with the weight of prophecy. For the first time, Strange saw not a god-king, but a man, one whose burden transcended time. He stepped back, his mind reeling from the enormity of it. "There must be another way. You cannot carry eternity alone." The Emperor's voice deepened, echoing through his very soul. "Then find it, sorcerer. Then find it, sorcerer. You who walk between order and chaos. You who see what my priests are blind to. There is a storm coming, one that even my light cannot pierce. When it arrives, mankind will need a guardian who remembers what it means to be mortal." The vision began to collapse. The golden path cracked and split as the warp howled to reclaim him. Strange felt the pull of his body once more, his astral form unraveling in the tide of raw energy. The Emperor's final words followed him as he fell through the light. Do not seek to save this galaxy. Seek to understand why it cannot be saved. He awoke with a gasp, the cell walls glowing faintly in the half-dark. The hum of machines was gone. In its place, he heard the faint whisper of the warp. Quieter now, but closer. It spoke with a new voice, one that sounded almost like his own. And for the first time, Dr. Strange realized that the Emperor's dream was not merely a vision. It was a warning and a burden he had just inherited. The whisper of the Emperor's voice still lingered in Strange's mind when the sound of boots shattered the silence. The cell door hissed open, bathing him in the sterile glow of corridor light. 2 soldiers entered, followed by Inquisitor Leren. Her presence filled the narrow space like a blade drawn in reverence and threat. She looked different now, less composed, shadows beneath her eyes betraying sleepless nights. You spoke to something, she said, her tone measured but sharp. The psychers monitoring you felt a disturbance in the Astronomican's signal. It spiked, then dimmed. Explain what you did. Strange rose slowly, the chains still binding his wrists clinking softly. I dreamed, he replied. But it wasn't a dream. I saw your Emperor. Or what remains of him? Or what remains of him? For a heartbeat, something flickered in her expression, doubt or perhaps fear. But it vanished as quickly as it came. A blasphemy, she said coldly. The Emperor does not commune with heretics. He didn't speak to me as a god, Strange countered, his voice calm yet heavy with certainty. He spoke as a man imprisoned by the faith built in his name. He asked me to understand what cannot be saved. The Inquisitor's jaw tightened. Enough, you will not spread such heresies here. Faith is the only wall between humanity and the warp. Without it, we fall. Strange met her gaze, the weight of his words pressing through the stale air. A faith for fear? You've built an empire of devotion, but it is chained by terror. You worship light while feeding the darkness. Her hand moved faster than thought, striking him across the face. The sound echoed off metal, followed by silence. You think your words are wisdom, she said, her voice trembling not with anger but something deeper, conflict. But faith is not a choice, it is survival. Blood traced a thin line down Strange's lip, yet he did not look away. Survival without understanding is stagnation. Your Emperor's light endures because you fear what happens when it fades. You think your faith shields you, but it binds you. Leren turned away, her cloak whispering across the floor. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her tone was quieter. You speak as though you pity us. I pity those who mistake obedience for hope, Strange said softly. Your people cling to dogma because the truth terrifies them. The warp is not evil by nature, it is reflection. Humanity created its demons long before they ever took form. She faced him again, her eyes hardening once more. You see through the lens of your own arrogance. To touch the warp is to drown in it. No mortal can navigate it and remain pure. Strange lifted his chained hands, faint traces of energy flickering along his skin like dying embers. A purity is not the same as peace. You believe corruption lies in the warp, but it begins in the heart that fears it. The soldiers shifted uneasily, muttering prayers under their breath. Strange felt their fear, the raw, instinctive terror of witnessing something they could not categorize as either miracle or sin. Leren exhaled slowly. You should be executed, she said at last. By every decree of the Inquisition, you are a heretic, a sorcerer unbound by the Emperor's will. Yet, her voice faltered. You sealed a warp breach that should have devoured this world. You saved my men, and now you claim to have communed with the Emperor himself. She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Tell me, why do you fight for us at all? Why not simply escape? Strange's gaze softened, though his voice carried the weight of unspoken exhaustion. Because I've seen what happens when good men mistake blind faith for truth. I won't let another universe burn for its own conviction. Her lips parted as though to respond, but before she could, alarms blared again in the distance, low, resonant, mournful. A mechanical voice echoed through the Vox channels overhead. Psycho disturbance detected. Sub-level detention wing. Wards collapsing. Lyran's expression darkened. Another breach. Strange felt it before the words finished leaving her mouth. The warp brushed against his senses, oily and seductive. It wasn't a breach. It was a soul breaking under its own faith. Where someone in your prisons is unraveling, he said. Their mind can't withstand the fear. The Inquisitor barked an order to her guards. Contain it, now. But Strange had already begun to move. The chains at his wrists glowed, reacting to the surge of energy building around him. Lorraine turned on him. You will stay here. He met her glare, the faintest hint of defiance flickering in his eyes. If I stay, you'll lose more than your prisoners. You'll lose this fortress. Before she could reply, the cell erupted in light. Strange's form blurred, dissolving into astral projection as he passed through the sealed door like mist. The soldiers shouted, firing their weapons into the air in panic, but the Inquisitor only stared at the place he had stood, her heart torn between fury and an emotion she dared not name. In the lower levels, Strange materialized amid chaos. The air rippled with psychic distortion. A prisoner, a frail man in tattered robes, was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by sigils drawn in blood. His eyes were gone, burned away by his own power. Forgive me, the man wept. I only wanted to see his light. The warp tore through him, flesh and soul twisting into something grotesque. Strange raised his hands, summoning wards of containment. Energy flared gold and violet, clashing with the red maelstrom. The demonic presence within the man screamed as Strange forced it back, sealing the fracture between worlds. When the silence returned, the prisoner lay lifeless. Strange lowered his hands, breathing heavily. A faith without understanding, he whispered, is just another chain. He turned as Lorraine arrived, flanked by soldiers. Her eyes swept over the devastation, then settled on him. For once, she did not speak. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truth. Finally, she gave a single order to her guards. Leave us. They hesitated, then obeyed. When they were gone, she looked at Strange and said quietly, You're right. Our faith binds us, but without it there is nothing left. Tell me, sorcerer, what do you offer in its place? Strange looked toward the flickering lamps above, their light dim against the creeping dark. Balance, he said at last. Not obedience, not fear, just balance. Lyran's gaze hardened once more, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her conflict. A balance, she repeated. In this galaxy that word is heresy. He met her eyes, calm and resolute. Then perhaps heresy is what's left of hope. Her silence was answer enough, and somewhere far beyond them the warp stirred, whispering through the cracks of faith that still chained the hearts of men. The torches along the fortress walls burned lower as the night deepened, their flames trembling in the heavy air. Strange sat in his cell once more, though the door had been left unlocked, a silent gesture from the Inquisitor, a truce neither of them would name. He stared at the dark ceiling, the faint hum of the machinery above blending with the murmurs of distant chanting. The events of the day lingered in his thoughts. The warp breach, the dying prisoner, Lorraine's question that had yet to find an answer. Balance. It was all he believed in, yet in this world, balance was heresy. He closed his eyes, seeking the stillness that had once guided him through countless trials. But the stillness never came. Instead, the warp breathed against his thoughts like a storm pressing against glass. He could feel it there, whispering in the edges of his mind, curious, patient, waiting. You have touched the light in the dark, the voice murmured, smooth as silk and cold as the void. You walk where gods fear to tread. Tell me, sorcerer, do you not feel it calling? Stranger's body tensed. He knew that voice. He had heard its echo within the warp, the voice of change, of ambition, of the eternal deceiver. A tincture, he whispered. Laughter rippled through his mind like the flutter of wings. Names are tools of mortals. You may call me what you wish. But I have watched you, Stephen Strange. You wield the warp as one born of it, yet you resist its gift. Why deny what you already are? He rose to his feet, his shadow stretching long across the cell wall. Because power without restraint is corruption, he said. And corruption is your only gift. Though your only gift. The air shimmered, the walls of the cell bending like liquid. The torches flared blue. From the darkness a shape began to form. Tall, shifting, cloaked in feathers and fire. Its face was ever-changing, a man, a beast, 1,000 masks. Its presence filled the space like a wound in reality. You speak of corruption as though it were foreign to you, the demon said, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. But tell me, Strange, did you not taste the warp when you sealed the breach? Did you not feel its song in your blood? It answered you because it knows you. Strange clenched his fists, summoning wards of golden light that flared around him in defiance. I am not yours, the demon smiled, or seemed to. You are everyone's and no one's. That is what makes you perfect. This Imperium of faith chains its souls with fear, while chaos offers freedom. You could reshape this galaxy, end its suffering. Why serve balance when you could define it? His wards trembled. The voice pressed deeper, threading through his memories. The Ancient One, the Sanctum, Christine's laughter, all refracted through a lens of desire. The demon's whispers coiled tighter. You could rebuild what they destroyed, heal what the Emperor has condemned to rot. All it takes is acceptance. Strange felt the temptation like fire in his veins. The warp pulsed, echoing his heartbeat, every thrum a promise. For a moment he saw himself standing amidst the stars, his hands commanding galaxies, the gods of this realm kneeling before him. The vision burned with terrible beauty. He drew a breath, forcing the illusion away. You promise freedom, he said, but you mean enslavement. You speak of creation, but you feed on ruin. The demon tilted its ever-shifting head. And what of your own world? You wielded forbidden power to rewrite fate. You meddled with time, with souls, with reality itself. Tell me, Doctor, how many of your choices were truly pure? The words struck like knives. For an instant, Strange faltered. The demon saw it and pressed the advantage. You cannot deny it. The warp does not create corruption, it reveals it. I offer you truth, not chains. Strange's hands shook, the golden light flickering. His mind burned with memories of every decision, every sacrifice, the bargain with Dormammu, the countless lives balanced upon his choices. Yes, he said quietly, the word heavy as lead. I have walked that path. I know what lies at the end of it. The demon leaned closer, its face now mirroring his own, a cruel reflection wreathed in blue flame. Then walk it again, with purpose this time. Together we could tear down the false gods, free this universe from its endless suffering. You would be its architect, not its savior. Strange closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, the idea lingered. Freedom, creation, power unrestrained. The warp itself seemed to hold its breath. Then softly he whispered, and when I am done, what remains of me? The demon's expression shifted, the illusion faltering for just a moment. That moment was enough. Strange raised his hand, his sigils igniting with pure golden fire. I am not your vessel, he said. I am the guardian of the threshold. And you are not welcome here. Light exploded through the cell, searing the demon's form. The warp howled as the entity recoiled, its laughter turning to fury. You cannot banish what is within you, it roared. You carry me now, whether you accept it or not. Then it was gone. The air collapsed inward and Strange fell to his knees, his body trembling. Smoke rose from his hands, the smell of burned ozone filling the room. His vision swam, the walls steadying only after long seconds of silence. He pressed a hand to his chest. The golden aura still flickered there, but beneath it, faint and pulsing, he felt something else. A spark, a shadow. The demon had not lied entirely. Some trace of the warp now lived within him. The door burst open. Lauren and her soldiers flooded in, weapons drawn. They froze at the sight of the scorch marks carved into the floor, the smell of brimstone in the air. The Inquisitor's eyes locked on his. What happened here? Strange stood slowly, his breath unsteady, his voice low. Something tried to make me its vessel. It failed. Her gaze lingered on him a long time, doubt mingling with the faintest trace of awe. And if it tries again? He looked past her, toward the narrow slit of window where the Forge World's dying sun burned red across the sky. Then I'll burn it out of me, no matter the cost. Loren studied him, the silence between them thick with unspoken understanding. You are a danger to all of us, she said at last. I know, Strange replied, but right now I may be the only thing standing between you and something far worse. Her eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. Then you will not leave my sight again. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. Yet as she turned away, Strange's hand brushed his chest where the warp's ember pulsed faintly. It beat in rhythm with his heart, whispering promises he dared not listen to. And deep within the Imperium, something laughed. A patient, knowing laughter that echoed through eternity. The days that followed passed in a blur of machinery, smoke and whispered suspicion. The fortress recovered from the warp's incursion, but something unseen lingered in the air, a tension that no hymn or prayer could dispel. Strange walked its corridors under constant watch, guarded not by chains this time, but by faith sharpened into suspicion. The Inquisitor had kept her word. He was never alone. Yet the soldiers who followed him could not comprehend what they were witnessing. They saw him speak to unseen forces, read from books of shifting symbols, and meditate beneath the flickering light of sanctified engines. They feared him, and rightly so. But even fear was not enough to conceal their curiosity. The whispers spread like wildfire through the ranks. The sorcerer who tamed the warp, the heretic who saved them all. Lauren called him to her chambers one evening. the red glow of the forge world bleeding through the narrow windows. She stood by a hollow map displaying fractures in the planet's surface where the breach had once been. The Mechanicus are divided, she said without preamble. Some believe your power could be harnessed. Others would rather see you vaporized and your ashes sanctified. Strange's tone was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of exhaustion. And what do you believe? Lyran turned toward him, her expression unreadable. I believe that you are a paradox. You claim mastery over the warp, yet speak as though you despise it. You condemn faith, yet you carry conviction stronger than any priest I've met. He met her gaze evenly. Conviction and faith aren't the same. Faith demands surrender. Conviction demands understanding. Her lips curved in a faint, humorless smile. You would not survive a day on Terra with that philosophy. The words struck him like a memory made flesh. Terra, the cradle of mankind, the seat of the Emperor's throne. He had glimpsed its golden aura in his vision, seen the suffering bound to its light. Then take me there, he said quietly. The Inquisitor's eyes widened slightly. You presume too much. I need to see it, Strange continued. The warp touched me. The Emperor spoke to me. If what I saw was true, Terra is not just the heart of your empire. It's the wound that keeps it bleeding. Her silence stretched long enough for the hum of the machines to fill the space between them. Finally, she said, you are asking for the impossible. Terra is sacred ground. No unsanctioned psyker, or heretic, sets foot there without the High Lord's decree. Then find a way, he replied. You've seen what I can do. You know I'm not your enemy. Lauren studied him for a long moment, then looked away. I'll consider it, she said at last. When she dismissed him, Strange returned to his quarters. The warp's presence within him pulsed faintly, a whisper beneath his heartbeat. He had not spoken to it since that night, though it had tried many times to tempt him again. Soft voices promising power, knowledge, release. But tonight, as he sat in meditation, the silence between them was worse than its whispers. He sank deeper into the trance, his consciousness slipping into the shadow between worlds. The forge's rumble faded, replaced by the rhythmic pulse of the warp. He was no longer in his body. He stood upon a barren plain of ash where the horizon burned with gold and black. Above him loomed the shadow of Terra, not the shining throne world of legend, but a planet wreathed in smoke and decay. He walked toward it, his feet stirring the dust of dead stars. The closer he drew, the more he felt the pull of its gravity, not the physical kind, but spiritual. Billions of souls cried out from its surface, their faith feeding the flame that sustained the Emperor's dying light. Each prayer was a chain, each hope a link. A voice came from behind him, low and familiar. You cannot free them. Not without becoming what you hate. Strange turned. The figure that stood before him was his mirror, yet not entirely his own. The robes were darker, the sigils carved into the flesh rather than woven into fabric. His eyes glowed faintly blue, the color of the warp's fire. You again, Strange said. The reflection smiled. Not him, it corrected. You. The part you're denying. The part that knows the truth. I've heard enough of your truth, Strange said, his tone measured. The other Strange stepped closer, the air around him rippling with latent energy. You think yourself pure because you resist corruption. But purity is stagnation. You seek balance in a universe that feeds on extremes. Here, only power endures. I've seen where that path leads, Strange replied. It ends with everything burning. And yet you stand in a galaxy built on fire, his double said softly. Tell me, Sorcerer Supreme, how long before you realize that to save this place you must become its shadow? The words cut deeper than he expected. The reflection extended a hand, its aura flickering between light and darkness. Take it. Accept the part of yourself that this realm demands. The Emperor carries the burden of all mankind. You could carry what he cannot. Strange hesitated. The pull was immense. Within that outstretched hand he saw a vision of what could be. Worlds healed, the warp subdued, the Imperium reborn in order rather than fear. He saw Lyran alive and unbroken, humanity united not by worship but by will. And yet beneath it all he felt the stench of deception, the soft rot of corruption dressed in salvation's robes. He drew back. I won't be your vessel. Not his, not yours, not anyone's. The shadow's smile widened. You already are. It lunged, merging with him in a torrent of light and flame. He screamed as the two halves of his being collided, light against shadow, order against chaos. The warp howled, reality bending around their struggle. When the storm subsided, Strange stood alone once more. His chest burned, the sigils on his hands glowing faintly blue and gold together. The balance had shifted. The demon's mark had rooted deeper, but so too had his resolve. He returned to his body with a shuddering breath. Sweat clung to his skin. In the corner of the room, Liran stood silently, having entered unnoticed. She had seen his body convulse, the aura around him flare. Her eyes held both fear and wonder. "What did you do?" she asked softly. Strange looked down at his hands, the colors still fading. "We walked through the shadow of terror," he said. "And I brought some of it back." Liran stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then may the Emperor protect us all." Strange's gaze turned toward the window, where the dying sun bled across the horizon. "No," he said quietly. "Not this time. The Emperor has slept long enough. It's time someone else faced the darkness." Outside, the Forge World's sky flickered as another storm of the warp stirred beyond its veil, and deep within that storm, something vast and unseen smiled. The journey from Vothrak's Prime to the Fortress Monastery was unlike anything Strange had endured before. The void ship that bore them screamed as it crossed the warp, its Geller field straining against the endless pressure of unreality outside. The chanting of the ship's priests echoed through the steel halls, each prayer a ward against madness. Strange sat in silence, eyes half closed, feeling the warp pressing like a heartbeat against the thin veil of reality. Liran stood nearby, her gaze fixed on him as though watching for cracks that would confirm her deepest fears. When they emerged into real space again, the sight before them stole his breath. The Fortress Monastery hung above a dying world, carved into the side of a massive asteroid like a cathedral of iron and stone. Its spires pierced the stars, each one crowned with burning pyres that never extinguished. He could feel the psychic gravity of the place long before they landed, a presence vast, disciplined, and old. The grey knights awaited them in the hangar, their silver armor gleaming with sanctified runes. They moved with silent purpose, each step a sermon of devotion. To Strange, they were living paradoxes, warriors born of faith and forged in psychic fire, guardians of a truth they could never question. Their leader stepped forward, helm under his arm. His face bore the calm severity of a man who had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "Inquisitor Vaust," he said, voice deep and measured, "we received your transmission. The Emperor's will guides you, and this," his eyes fell upon Strange, "is the one who walks the line." Liran inclined her head. "Are Dr. Stephen Strange, former protector of another realm? He has faced the warp and lived. The Emperor may yet have use for him." The knight's gaze hardened. "Or he may be its weapon." Strange said nothing. The air in the hangar vibrated with psychic tension as the warriors studied him, their minds like burning suns behind their eyes. He felt their scrutiny pierce through him, testing the strength of his will, searching for the taint of chaos. When they found none, their leader gave a slow nod. "Bring him to the Librarius," he ordered. They led him through corridors lined with marble and steel, every wall carved with scripture. The scent of oil and incense filled the air. The deeper they went, the heavier the psychic pressure became. At last they entered a vast chamber that pulsed with power. It was lined with relics of war and knowledge, books bound in human skin, psychic amplifiers humming with restrained energy, and suspended orbs of raw warp light encased in stasis fields. Here the librarians waited. They were not like the grey knights outside. These were scholars of the mind, each cloaked in blue, their eyes burning with inner light. They stood in a circle around a dais where runes of containment had been carved into the stone. Strange was brought to its center. One of the librarians spoke, his voice echoing with the resonance of a mind accustomed to command. "You have walked in the warp without corruption. You claim mastery of forces that defy understanding. We will see the truth of this." Strange met his gaze. "Understanding is not ownership," he said quietly. "The warp is not a thing to be mastered, it is to be endured." The librarian's expression remained unreadable. "Endurance is meaningless without control." With a gesture, he activated the runes beneath Strange's feet. A surge of psychic energy erupted, encasing the circle in blinding light. Strange felt the pressure instantly. His thoughts pulled apart, his spirit laid bare. They were probing him, testing his essence against the weight of the Imperium itself. He resisted the instinct to fight. Instead, he let the warp's energy flow through him, guiding it rather than opposing it. Golden light flared from his hands, weaving itself into the storm. The librarians faltered. The power that flowed from him was not tainted, yet it was unlike any psychic energy they had ever encountered. It was structured, deliberate, magic woven with discipline rather than instinct. The circle trembled. One of the younger librarians stumbled, clutching his head. Ease resonating with the field, he gasped, not resisting it, harmonizing. The lead librarian's eyes narrowed. Impossible, impossible. Strange raised his voice above the hum of power. Impossible. You of all people should know better. The warp isn't chaos, it's reflection. It becomes what we bring to it. You fight it as though it were your enemy, and so it devours you. The energy surged higher, and the chamber shook. The Grey Knights outside moved instinctively, hands on weapons, but Lauren raised a hand to stop them. Her eyes were fixed on Strange, who stood at the center of the maelstrom, untouched. The golden light from his aura intertwined with the blue psychic fire of the librarians until the room became a storm of light and shadow. Then, as suddenly as it began, the power collapsed inward, the runes dimmed. Strange stood in the circle, breathing heavily, his eyes glowing faintly gold. The librarians staggered, their minds reeling from what they had witnessed. The lead librarian approached him slowly. "You walk the edge of heresy," he said, his voice low. "Yet you speak truth the Imperium has forgotten. The warp reflects belief, and belief is our weapon." Perhaps he hesitated, as though the admission burned his throat. Perhaps we have been wielding it blindly. Strange looked around the chamber, his gaze lingering on the relics of war, the symbols of faith carved into every surface. "A blindness is born of fear," he said softly. "And fear is the warp's greatest ally." The librarian nodded once, reluctantly. "You will remain here under observation. The Emperor's will shall decide your fate. But know this, if even a shadow of corruption touches you, there will be no mercy." Strange inclined his head. "We would expect nothing less." As the Grey Knights escorted him from the chamber, Lauren walked beside him, her voice quiet enough that only he could hear. "You've changed them," she said, "even if they'll never admit it." Wise Strange's eyes met hers briefly, calm yet weary. "Change is never admitted. It's only endured." She glanced toward the towering statues of saints lining the corridor. "And what about you? What are you enduring now?" He looked ahead toward the endless halls of the fortress, the echo of his own words haunting him. "Myself," he said finally, "and the shadow that grows when faith and doubt share the same heart." Far above, in the cathedral's spires, the warp shimmered faintly against the void, a ripple of anticipation, as if watching the sorcerer who dared to bring balance to a universe that had long since forgotten it. The fortress monastery slept beneath the endless hum of its machines. In the vast silence between the echoing hymns, Strange stood alone in the Hall of Echoes, staring at the relic suspended before him, a fragment of the Emperor's psychic circuitry, salvaged from some ancient ruin of terror. It pulsed faintly, alive yet dormant, a sliver of divine machinery that fed upon faith as others fed upon air. He had studied it for hours, tracing the flow of energy, the subtle harmonics that linked it to the Astronomicon far beyond, and as he watched he began to see it not as technology, nor as relic, but as language. The warp hummed in answer, distant yet near like breath against glass. He could feel it through the fragment, the same current that had once drawn him into this world. The Emperor's dream pulsed within that light, restrained by dogma, distorted by prayer. Somewhere within it, Strange sensed what the Imperium had forgotten, that the warp could be more than a reflection of fear. It could heal, it could create. The thought came unbidden, dangerous, heretical, but irresistible. Creation was the highest sin in this galaxy, reserved only for the God Emperor. Yet the Emperor himself was trapped in decay, his light fading with every passing century. If the Imperium's faith fed his suffering, perhaps balance could restore what worship had poisoned. He extended his hand toward the fragment, his aura unfolding in golden threads. The air quivered, the runes on the floor flickering in protest. His voice was steady, a whisper woven with precision and defiance. "Not to command," he murmured, "but to mend." The energy surged, bright and violent. The fragment's glow intensified, reacting to him, merging with the rhythm of his magic. For the briefest instant, the warp and the material became one, a fragile harmony of opposites. He could feel it working, the rift between realms softening, the energy aligning into structure. Hope bloomed within him. Then something shifted. A crack, sharp and deep, tore through the harmony. The golden light darkened to violet, the air turning cold. The warp flared in rebellion, as if offended by his presumption. It poured through the fracture like blood through an open wound, coiling around him in invisible tendrils. He tried to contain it, drawing sigils in the air faster, each one collapsing under the weight of what he had unleashed. The warp was not content to be healed. It demanded worship or destruction, never balance. His breath caught as the floor itself began to twist, the symbols warping into shapes that spoke of hunger. The doors burst open. Lyran stormed in, flanked by grey knights, her face a mixture of fury and horror. "Sorry, what have you done?" Strange's eyes glowed like molten gold as he fought to hold the energies in place. He was trying to stabilize it, to restore harmony to the Astronomican signal. The Emperor's light doesn't have to consume. It can sustain. Her voice rose over the roaring air. "You dare tamper with the Emperor's design. You're calling the warp into sacred ground." He gritted his teeth, straining against the psychic current. "Your Emperor is dying, Lyran. I saw it. His body burns with the weight of his faith, but his soul is trapped in the very storm he commands." "I can save him." The words hit her like a blade. "Save him?" she spat. "You would defile him. You would undo the sacrifice that holds the galaxy together." The room shuddered as reality buckled. The fragment fractured further, and from within it the warp bled through, a radiant fissure of light and shadow expanding into form. The grey knights raised their weapons, chanting wards of banishment, their voices barely audible over the shriek of collapsing dimensions. Strange's power faltered. The energy slipped from his grasp, twisting into a new shape. Alive, sentient, a figure stepped forth from the rift, its form shifting between human and divine, its presence both beautiful and terrible. It looked upon Strange with familiarity, as if it had always been there, waiting within him. "You have done what even the Emperor feared," the being said, its voice a harmony of 1,000 echoes. "You have touched the root of creation." The knights opened fire, bolts of psychic flames slamming into the creature. Each strike dissolved into nothing. Lyran shouted orders, her voice raw with fury. "Contain it, in the Emperor's name." Strange turned, his hands raised not in defense but in plea. "Stop. It's not chaos. It's what the warp could be. It's the reflection of life without fear." The being smiled sadly. "There is no life without fear, Strange. You forget, the warp is not your universe's magic. It is humanity's soul, twisted and raw. You sought to heal it, and so it gave you what you desired most. A mirror." He realized then the truth. It wasn't a creature from outside. It was born from within him, shaped by his intent and his doubt alike. The sin of creation was his own shadow made manifest. The chamber erupted in fire. The grey knights fell to their knees under the psychic weight. Strange could feel the being's essence intertwining with his, feeding on his strength, his memories, his will. "No," he whispered, summoning every last fragment of discipline he possessed. "I won't let you take this world." "You already have," it whispered back. "Your creation has no master and no mercy." With a cry, Strange unleashed a final surge of power, tearing his own spell apart. The explosion was blinding, light and shadow collapsing into silence. When the smoke cleared, the chamber was in ruins. The fragment had been reduced to dust. The grey knights lay unconscious, their armor scorched. Lyran stood barely upright, her gaze locked on him in disbelief. Strange knelt amidst the wreckage, trembling, his skin marked with faint blue sigils that pulsed like veins of light. The entity was gone, or perhaps buried deeper within him. He could still feel its heartbeat echoing with his own. Lyran approached slowly, her voice shaking. "You've done it. You've committed the greatest heresy imaginable. You've created life from the warp." He lifted his head, his voice hoarse but resolute. "No, I've revealed the truth you've all forgotten. Creation and destruction are the same breath. You just choose which name to give it." Her eyes blazed with equal parts fury and sorrow. "You've doomed yourself. Maybe all of us." He stood unsteadily, the golden and blue light flickering across his form. "Or maybe," he said, "I've just reminded the universe that even in damnation there's still choice." The chamber trembled once more, the echoes of his creation lingering like the breath of a god, and far above, in the Astronomican's distant light, something stirred, aware of what had been done. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound could be. The chamber reeked of burnt ozone and sanctified oil, its walls scorched black where divine machinery had melted under the weight of what Strange had unleashed. The air still shimmered with residual energy, fragments of light that refused to die. Every breath tasted of ashes and fear. The doors burst open with a roar of hydraulic fury, and inquisitorial troops poured into the ruins, their armor shining beneath the red emergency glow. Servo skulls hovered like specters above them, chanting fragments of litanies to cleanse the air. At their center marched a figure draped in black and gold, a Lord Inquisitor of the Ordo Hereticus, his presence colder than the void itself. Lauren stood rigid as he entered, her hand trembling at her side. "Oh, my lord," she began, her voice low. "He." The Lord Inquisitor raised a gloved hand, silencing her. His gaze fell upon Strange, who stood amid the wreckage like a man both alive and condemned. The reports spoke of heresy, the Inquisitor said, his tone calm, precise, merciless. But this borders on apostasy of the highest order. Apostasy of the highest order. Strange's expression remained steady, though exhaustion had carved deep shadows beneath his eyes. "I sought to heal what your emperor cannot," he said. "To bring harmony where you've built only walls of fire." A murmur passed through the assembled soldiers, their weapons shifting uneasily. The Inquisitor stepped closer, his every movement measured, deliberate. "You presume to question the Emperor's design? You, an intruder, a sorcerer whose very existence offends the laws of man." Strange met his gaze without flinching. "Your Emperor is dying under the weight of your worship. You mistake decay for divinity." The slap came like thunder. The Inquisitor's hand struck him across the face, sending him to one knee. "A blasphemer," he said, voice trembling with restrained wrath. "You dare speak of the Master of Mankind as if you comprehend his will?" "I don't claim to understand him," Strange said, blood trickling from his lip. "But I've seen what your faith does. It consumes everything it touches. You've turned belief into a weapon, and now it's killing the very thing you claim to protect." The Inquisitor's eyes hardened. "You would undo 10,000 years of sacrifice for your arrogance? No. You are not healer, sorcerer, you are contagion." He turned to Lauren. "You brought him here. You brought him here. You sanctioned his experiments." She froze, the color draining from her face. "My lord, I acted under necessity." He sealed a warp breach. By invoking its power, the Inquisitor interrupted. "You allowed corruption into sanctified ground. You will answer for this failure." Strange rose slowly, the golden light within his eyes flickering. "She is not to blame," he said. "I acted on my own. I broke your laws because your laws break everything they touch." The Inquisitor turned on him, voice sharp as a blade. "You speak as though you understand humanity's burden. Do you know how many worlds burn because of the unrestrained? How many fall to chaos each day? The Imperium survives because we are ruthless, because mercy is heresy." "Then you've already lost," Strange said quietly. "Any empire that needs cruelty to survive has already killed its soul." The silence that followed was suffocating. The Lord Inquisitor regarded him with a stillness that was more dangerous than rage. Finally, he spoke. "By decree of the Ordo Malleus and the Ecclesiarch, you are declared excommunicate, traitoress. You will be purged in the Emperor's light." He gestured to his men. "Take him." The soldiers advanced, their movements uncertain. Strange could feel their fear, the trembling edge of doubt in their faith. He did not resist as they bound his arms again, the manacles pulsing faintly with psychic wards. As they dragged him toward the corridor, he caught Loren's gaze. She looked hollow, caught between duty and conscience. He saw the war in her eyes, the fragile thread of doubt beginning to unravel. The procession moved through the monastery, the chanting of the faithful echoing from the walls. The smell of incense thickened as they entered the sanctum of judgment. It was a cathedral of metal and bone, its towering windows filled with firelight. At its center stood a great pyre of purified fuel. The soldiers forced him to his knees before it. The Inquisitor's voice rose, solemn and cold. "Stephen Strange, accused of warp heresy, manipulation of forbidden energies, and blasphemy against the Emperor of Mankind, you stand condemned. Your soul will be offered as penance to cleanse the sin of your existence." Strange's gaze lingered on the pyre's light, the flames reflecting in his tired eyes. "You think to destroy me with fire," he said softly, "but fire is creation as much as it is destruction." The Inquisitor raised his hand, invoking the Emperor's name. "Let this heretic's soul be scattered to the stars." The torches lowered, the flames roared to life, but before they could touch him, the air trembled. The pyre's fire twisted violently, its color shifting from gold to deep cerulean. A whisper cut through the chanting, a voice only Strange could hear. "You cannot destroy what you've made part of yourself." The blue fire erupted upward, engulfing the chamber. Soldiers fell back, shields raised against the impossible heat. Strange stood untouched within the inferno, his aura blazing gold and blue at once. The energy pulsed outward, throwing the Inquisitor to the ground. When the light faded, Strange still stood, unburned, unbound. The manacles lay shattered at his feet, his voice carried across the stunned silence. "He told you before," he said, his tone neither boast nor threat. "A balance isn't heresy, it's survival." The soldiers wavered, unsure whether to kneel or fire. The Inquisitor rose shakily, his fury barely restrained. "You are an abomination," he hissed. "You defy even the Emperor's judgment." Strange's gaze softened. "No," he said quietly. "I answer to something older than judgment. Fire." The chamber trembled, the pyre's embers flaring as though the warp itself listened. Strange turned toward Lorraine, her face pale in the shifting light. "If you still believe in faith," he said, "then have faith that this world can still be healed." Then, with a motion as fluid as thought, he vanished in a burst of golden sparks. The silence that followed was absolute. The Inquisitor fell to one knee, trembling with rage and disbelief. "Find him," he rasped. "Find him before his heresy becomes a god." But even as he spoke, somewhere far beyond the monastery's reach, a new light flickered across the warp, neither holy nor damned, but something between. A spark of creation that refused to die. The warp was silent when he emerged, its endless expanse stretching before him like an ocean of thought frozen in anticipation. Dr. Strange drifted through it, his body no longer bound by the rules of flesh or gravity. He had escaped the Inquisition's judgment, but he had not escaped himself. The blue flame within him burned brighter than ever, each pulse echoing the whisper that haunted his every breath. He had fled through the veil of reality itself, vanishing from the pyre's fire into the Imperium, drawn not by choice but by inevitability. He could feel it now, the subtle pull of a will older than creation, vast and patient. The warp parted before him like a curtain of smoke, revealing a vast horizon of shifting color and form. From that living storm came laughter, distant yet intimate, echoing from every direction. "So the healer of worlds finally understands the price of his mercy." The voice was not a sound, but a presence. Strange turned slowly. Out of the radiant void a figure began to take shape, a being both magnificent and monstrous, its form ever-changing, a storm of feathers, eyes, and flame. The Lord of Change had come. Tzinch, the architect of fate, the eternal manipulator whose schemes stretched beyond the comprehension of gods. Strange felt the warp bend around the creature's will, reality itself folding into spirals of thought. "You've been waiting for me," Strange said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. The demon's laughter rippled through existence. "Waiting? No, Stephen Strange. I made you." The words struck him like a blade of truth wrapped in poison. "You lie," he said, though the conviction in his tone faltered. "Do I?" The demon's form shifted, its face becoming his own, a reflection of strange eyes blazing with the same golden blue light. "You touched the warp to heal, to create. Who do you think whispered the possibility into your heart? Who gave you the thought that defied your gods?" Strange's aura flared, golden sigils circling him like shields. "You did not give me the will to act. You only waited to twist it." Tzinch's many faces smiled. "Ah, but what is will but a thread I pluck when I choose? Every defiance, every rebellion, every spark of change, mine. You call it resistance, I call it obedience to the inevitable." The warp shuddered as the demon's laughter turned to thunder. Images erupted around them, visions of the past and future. He saw himself at Kamartaj, standing before the Ancient One. He saw the moment his hands trembled after the car crash. He saw the first spell he ever cast, the first time he defied time itself to cheat death. And in every reflection the blue fire flickered faintly as though it had always been there. Strange clenched his fists. "No," he whispered, "my choices are my own, my failures, my triumphs, mine." Tzinch's wings unfurled, vast and terrible, blotting out the light. "You are a paradox, Stephen Strange, a creature who believes he can impose order upon the infinite. You thought to mend the warp itself. Do you understand what that means? You challenged me in my own dominion. And you succeeded." The admission sent a chill through him. "Then why not destroy me?" The demon's voice softened, almost tender. "Because I have no need to destroy what I already possess." A sudden pain tore through him. Strange fell to his knees, clutching his chest as the mark of the warp ignited beneath his skin. Blue and gold light spilled from his hands, his veins glowing with power not entirely his own. The voice within him grew louder, speaking in his mind, not as command but as invitation. "You carry my seed, sorcerer. You have seen the Emperor's decay, the Imperium's blindness, the futility of balance. You alone possess the power to remake this age. All I ask is that you cease fighting what you have already become. He felt it then, the temptation, the sheer magnitude of what could be done if he yielded. He could reshape this cruel, broken galaxy into something whole. He could silence the Emperor's suffering, end the tyranny of faith, and bend the warp into harmony. The vision bloomed before him like a sunrise of infinite color. He saw humanity lifted from ignorance, guided not by gods or fear, but by will, his will. But beneath that beauty, he saw the truth. Every soul in that world would move according to his design, their freedom traded for his order. Creation would become control. The balance he sought would be devoured by his own hand. He raised his head, meeting Tizenchi's gaze. "You speak of destiny," he said, his voice hoarse, but unyielding. "Oh, but all I see is slavery disguised as purpose." The demon's form twisted, its laughter rising into a shriek that cracked the stars. "Foolish mortal, do you think you can stand apart from destiny? I am change itself. Even your defiance serves me. Then let my defiance be the first thing you don't understand," Strange said. He drew upon the very essence of his soul, reaching deeper than he ever had before. The light within him burned brighter, searing through the mark on his flesh. The power of the warp surged against him, but he did not yield. He turned it inward, collapsing the torrent into a single, blinding spark. The warp screamed. The demon recoiled, its form unraveling into 1,000 fragments. "What are you doing?" Strange's voice rose over the storm. "What I should have done from the beginning, taking back what's mine." The golden light flared, consuming both of them. The psychic tide imploded, collapsing the space around them into silence. When the light faded, Strange stood alone. The Lord of Change was gone, banished or perhaps merely waiting. The warp had stilled, but the price was carved into his flesh. The mark no longer glowed, yet it remained, a reminder of what he had touched, and what had touched him in return. He looked into the endless void and whispered, "You will not have me." From the darkness a faint echo answered, "We already do." Strange closed his eyes, feeling the cold hum of reality beginning to return. He had won, perhaps, but victories in the warp were illusions. The demon's laughter still lingered, faint and eternal, woven into the rhythm of his heartbeat. And as he drifted back toward the fragile boundary of the material world, the thought crept upon him like a shadow he could not cast off. If Tizench was the master of all change, then even this defiance might have been part of his design. The return to reality was not gentle. Dr. Strange fell through the veil like a dying star, striking the barren ground of a ruined world. The air was cold, metallic, filled with the scent of burnt stone and old blood. For a long while he did not move, only listened to the silence, to the faint whisper of the warp still coiling at the edge of perception. It was quiet and now subdued, yet he could feel its eyes upon him, watching with the patience of eternity. He rose slowly, his cloak torn, his hands scorched by the battle that had consumed both flesh and spirit. Around him stretched a wasteland of grey, lit only by the distant light of dying suns. He did not know how long he had been gone, hours, years, centuries, but the galaxy felt heavier, as though it had aged in his absence. In the distance, he saw a city in ruin, its towers half collapsed, its cathedrals silent. Strange walked toward it, his footsteps echoing through the dust. The streets were empty, but their stones remembered. Every shattered wall whispered prayers to gods that no longer listened. He passed statues of the Emperor, defaced and crumbling, their once glorious visages now twisted by corrosion and neglect. Humanity had endured, but not prospered. The light of faith had dimmed to embers, its warmth consumed by fear. As he walked, he felt a pulse, weak but insistent, radiating from beyond the horizon. It was the same light he had touched within the warp, the same presence that had spoken to him in the Emperor's dream. The astronomicon still burned, though faintly, its flame flickering under the weight of millennia. He knew then what he had to do. He found an ancient transport, half buried in the dust, and with effort coaxed it to life using what little remained of his magic. The engines roared weakly, their prayers of ignition crackling through broken Vox relays. The journey to Terra was longer still without the warp routes that once bridged the stars. But Strange endured, sleep and time blurred. His body weakened, but his will did not. He had seen what waited beyond the veil, and he would not let this universe die in silence. When he arrived, Terra was unrecognizable. Its skies were veiled in endless ash, its continents cracked by centuries of war. The palace still stood, vast and terrible, its golden towers now blackened by the smoke of devotion. Billions still prayed here, billions who no longer remembered why. He walked among them unseen, his cloak concealing him as he ascended the broken stairs of the imperial palace. The custards stood as silent statues, their eyes empty, their faith replaced by ritual. They did not stop him. Perhaps they could not see him at all. He was half a ghost now, half something else. The warp's mark within him pulsed faintly, neither curse nor gift, but burden. At last he came to the great chamber of the golden throne. Its light was dimmer than when he had seen it in vision, its hum now a broken rhythm, a dying heartbeat echoing across reality. The emperor's body remained upon the throne, desiccated, skeletal, yet still alive in ways that defied all understanding. Around him, machines whispered prayers in binary, feeding the last scraps of life into the god who had become his own monument. Strange approached slowly, his footsteps soft against the cold floor. For a long time he said nothing. He could feel the emperor's mind even now, vast, fractured, eternal. It reached toward him, faint as a whisper carried on wind. "You return." The voice was weaker than before, its strength fading like the final note of a song. Strange bowed his head. "I return because your light is dying," he said, "and the galaxy dies with it. So it must. All light fades, all empires fall." "No," Strange replied, his voice quiet but resolute. Quiet but resolute. "The cycle can break. The warp can be healed. Not by domination, not by fear, but by understanding. You saw what humanity could be. You built them in your image, and they built cages in yours. Let me end it." The chamber trembled. The emperor's eyes opened, twin embers burning faintly within the hollow sockets. "You speak of salvation through balance. You seek to bind chaos to will. But even now it lives within you. I see its mark." Strange looked down at his hands where faint lines of blue and gold still glimmered beneath the skin. "Then let it die with me," he said. He raised his hands, tracing sigils in the air, slowly, reverently. The light of the warp began to gather, coalescing around him in concentric circles. The energy thrummed with impossible resonance, harmonizing with the dying hum of the throne. This was no spell of destruction nor of control. It was an act of surrender, of final equilibrium. The walls shook. The machine priests outside screamed prayers of alarm, their mechanical limbs flailing as they felt the power rising. The warp itself stirred, sensing something it had not known since the dawn of creation, a will that sought neither to command nor to consume it, but to forgive it. The emperor's voice grew fainter. "You would give yourself to the storm." "I already did," Strange whispered. "But this time I choose how it ends." The light expanded, filling the chamber with brilliance. Strange felt his body unravel, his soul stretching outward, his consciousness merging with the warp's vast current. He saw everything, every life, every prayer, every dying star. He felt the warp tremble under the weight of his will, not in defiance, but in recognition. He was neither man nor god, neither sorcerer nor heretic. He was the bridge between thought and form, chaos and order. The emperor's last words reached him through the fading light. "Then go, Sorcerer Supreme. Let your death be the last incantation," and Strange did. His final act was not a spell, but a choice, a gift cast into eternity. The Astronomicon flared brighter than it had in 10,000 years, its beam cutting through the warp like a sunrise across darkness. For a moment, the madness of the Imperium stilled. For a heartbeat, mankind remembered peace. When the light faded, the throne was empty. The emperor's body remained motionless, silent. And somewhere beyond the veil, a new star burned in the warp's endless sea, steady, golden, eternal. Those who looked upon it called it a miracle, others called it heresy. But among the psychers who touched its glow, a whisper began to spread through the Imperium. It was a voice calm and distant, echoing through the infinite storm. "There is balance still." Centuries passed, though the concept of time meant little within the depths of the warp. Empires rose and crumbled. Planets burned were rebuilt and burned again. Faith fractured and reformed, its edges sharper, its shadows deeper. The Imperium endured, as it always had, in a cycle of survival mistaken for glory. Yet somewhere within the endless storm, beneath the screams of demons and the chorus of lost souls, something had changed. It began as a tremor, a pulse beneath the chaos subtle as breath. The tides of the Imperium, long ruled by hunger and madness, seemed to pause. Where once there was only fury and fire, there came an echo, faint, rhythmic, almost human. It rippled through the sea of unreality like a memory struggling to be remembered. The demons recoiled from it, not in fear but in confusion. It was not the Emperor's beacon that sang this note. It was something quieter, older, unbound by prayer or God. The first to hear it were the Psychers. Across 1,000 worlds, those sensitive to the warp began to dream. They saw a figure shrouded in gold and shadow, walking upon a vast ocean of starlight. His eyes were calm, his expression neither wrathful nor divine. In every dream he spoke no words, but when they woke they could still hear his voice, gentle, unwavering, within the marrow of their souls. A whisper that said, "There is balance still." The ecclesiarchy denounced the dreams as heresy. They called it a test from the dark gods, a corruption meant to lure the faithful from the Emperor's path, yet no exorcism could banish it, no sanction could silence it. The more the priests condemned it, the more people began to hear it. Pilgrims wept during their prayers, claiming to feel warmth within the light of the Astronomicon that had not been there for millennia. Warp storms began to calm, their endless tempests stilled for fleeting moments of impossible serenity. On Terra, the priests of the Golden Throne noticed the change first. The Emperor's beacon burned brighter, not with the rage of divine suffering but with steady illumination. The Adeptus Mechanicus could not explain it. Their machines registered fluctuations in psychic output that defied all reason. The Emperor's body remained unmoving, but the air around the throne thrummed with quiet life. The custards felt it too, the faint rhythm, like a heartbeat long forgotten. Whispers spread through the imperial palace. Some claimed it was the Emperor reborn. Others spoke of a false god come to steal mankind's faith. But there were a few hidden among the scholars of forbidden knowledge and the surviving librarians of the Grey Knights, who dared to speak another name. They remembered the sorcerer who had vanished in golden light. The heretic who had faced the warp and returned. The man who had walked between gods and monsters. They called him the Balance Keeper. Yet the Imperium, in its infinite hunger for certainty, could not tolerate ambiguity. The Inquisition declared the phenomenon a psychic contagion. Planets that reported widespread whispering were quarantined. Psychers were executed by the thousands in futile attempts to halt the spread. But even in death, the echo persisted. The warp itself seemed to resist their purges, carrying the whisper further, softer, until it reached the hearts of those who had never known faith at all. Lyran Voust lived to see it. Now an old woman, scarred by centuries of service, she sat within a cloister of stone on a distant world untouched by the Mechanicus machines. Her hair was silver, her eyes dim, but her mind remained sharp. She had seen too much to believe in miracles. Yet when she closed her eyes at night, she heard it, the same whisper that had haunted her since that day in the burning cathedral. Sometimes she dreamed of him. Strange, standing amid the flames, his aura blazing with light that was neither holy nor profane. She remembered his last words before vanishing into the void. Have faith that this world can still be healed. For decades, she had called it madness. Now she wasn't so sure. Outside her monastery, the night sky trembled with auroras, ribbons of gold and blue that shimmered where the warp touched the real. The priests said it was a sign of divine favor. The scholars said it was a storm. Lyran knew better. It was him. It was him. The last trace of the sorcerer who had defied gods and demons alike. As she watched the sky, a young acolyte approached her, breathless. "Revered Inquisitor," he said softly, "the astropaths report a phenomenon within the Astronomicon. The light, it's singing." She turned to him, her old voice steady. "What do they hear?" The boy hesitated, eyes wide. "Yea, voice. They say it isn't the Emperor. They say it's human." Lyran smiled faintly, a single tear cutting a path down her weathered face. "Are not human," she whispered, "are just what humanity forgot it could be." In the heart of the warp, far beyond mortal sight, the presence stirred. Strange no longer had form as men understood it, yet he remained aware. A consciousness adrift within the sea of dreams, he felt the galaxy's pulse as one feels their own heartbeat. The warp still roiled with chaos, but within its depths flowed new currents, gentler, clearer. The storms bent around his presence, their fury softened. He did not command them, he guided them as one might guide a wounded creature back to calm. For every soul that prayed, for every mind that reached toward the void in fear, his whisper was there, steady and patient. He had become what the Emperor could not, an equilibrium between divinity and mortality, yet even now the darkness lingered. He could feel Tizench watching, its laughter faint, amused, endless. The great game had not ended. It merely changed its shape. Strange knew this, and still he smiled. Balance was not victory, it was endurance, and endurance was enough. The warp breathed. Stars flared to life in systems long dead. The Astronomicon's light shimmered across the void, touching worlds that had not seen the Emperor's guidance in centuries. Somewhere, a child born under that glow opened their eyes for the first time and did not cry. And through all the storms, through every silence between screams, the whisper endured, soft, unending, eternal. There is balance still.